Um, when I did last week's video and some of the things came up around allies and allyship, something was at the back of my head in that conversation. And I was thinking, if we're really going to affect change, I think it's good to have allies, but I think it's better to have friends. And I say that because if there's an issue or a viewpoint, I think how I process all of that information will depend on how close I am to the person. So when we were talking about race and race relations and change, I was thinking, if we're really going to make this change last, I think we need to be doing these things with friends. So I figured, okay, I've spoken to my Black friend, and now I think it's only fair that we have this conversation. How are you feeling? What's on top?
For me, I think that watching that video, I think I only watched about 10 seconds of it. Like I physically couldn't do it because I just, for me, seeing that video, I was like having movements in my body, like physically wanting to stop it myself. And I just couldn't bear to watch it. And I just sort of was reflecting on, you know, conversations that we've had over the past and thinking about how much I've learned from listening to you and your experiences and, you know, people that you are close to and their experiences, and how much I guess I've learned over these last couple of years, you know, and obviously there's still so much for me to learn, but as, you know, as you say, like allies and friends, like you are my friends, and I think it makes me feel really uncomfortable and really emotional to hear your experiences, and it upsets me, but I only have to sort of listen to them, and you know, I can't imagine what it's like to actually experience that, and you know, that's why I want to sort of sit here and, you know, learn more and what else can I do, because you are my friends. Like I just, like, for me, I hate that my friends are experiencing something so not right, and you know, it's been socially accepted for so long, and yeah, it's just awful, you know.
Okay, I'm going to go to Joe next. Joe, what's on top?
So, sort of the big takeaway from this whole thing for me has been the sort of the narrative that I've seen from white people in the media saying, you know, white privilege is learning about racism. You know, my first experiences with racism were sort of finding out what it was either through the news or, you know, hearing it secondhand accounts of it. Whereas, you know, for Black people and BAME people, racism isn't something that you learn; it's something that you experience firsthand. And I think that right there is sort of the hits the nail on the head. You know, that white privilege isn't so much, you know, financial or like economic or whatever. It's that exact thing that, you know, I've grown up fortunate enough not to be in a position where someone has looked down me or made judgments about me because of the color of my skin, and unfortunately so many people have. And I think when you bring that into the whole George Floyd debate, is you look at it and see a man who's been stopped and died on the back of that. And I think something I saw on Twitter that was a white person's post saying that he committed the very same offence as George Floyd. He used some contraband or counterfeit money, I think it was, and he said that for him, that is a story he tells at dinner parties. It's a story he tells at barbecues. For George Floyd, it was a death sentence, and that's it right there. I think that's sort of cuts to it.
Wow, I think that felt heavy. Thanks for sharing, Joe.
No worries.
Mark?
A real kind of range of feelings, I guess, and you know, and I know that, you know, in the videos that you sort of did with the ladies last week, and over the however many chats you'd had about it, that kind of real sort of raft of emotion, and I think that obviously being in the situation that we're in anyway has contributed towards that. Going through kind of deep sadness and trying to have some understanding of the situation, not how, and I think, you know, Emma had sent you a message, that really amazing message that Emma sent. It was really kind of eloquent and articulated very clearly kind of what she sort of had wanted to say to you, and it was around sort of trying to understand this moment because this is something that has been, and you know, you and I spoke about this quite recently. This is the same agenda and same issue that has been tabled since however long. It's the same thing coming up over and over and over and over and over again. This, I don't know if this will be different. It feels different, and whether that is purely, you know, circumstantial in that it's COVID time. We're living in this COVID time where we're all indoors, we're all more exposed, we're reading more, we're seeing more, we're talking more, I think. So that kind of real range of emotion has been, it's been a bit of a kind of up and down thing. And you know, Emma said this about the friendship thing, and you know, you and I are extremely close, and trying to kind of understand the hurt that you might be feeling, or that, yeah, Black people in that will feel in this, and then, but also hopeful that significant change, whatever that is, whatever the change is that has to happen, that significant change can come from this, because it can't keep going, it can't carry on, and whatever the problem is, or whoever the problem is, needs to be highlighted, and it needs to be repeatedly talked about. And this conversation can't stop, it can't go anywhere, it can't, once we're allowed out again, it can't stop happening. Yeah, I think personally just felt like a real range of emotion throughout this.
Why do you think, and this is for all of you, not just Mark, why do you think it keeps coming back? Why? It's not a new problem. Why does it keep coming back? Why do we keep coming back to this?
Just for me, I think, like Mark said, it is different this time, and I think that's because a lot more people have sort of spoken up, and a lot more people are like willing, you know, to contribute to the change. And that doesn't mean that everyone that's spoken up is, and I think that's really important to mention, because I think for some people, and hopefully the minority of people, it is a trend, you know, on social media, and you know, everyone was doing Blackout Tuesday, and you know, people were doing it, and I think not really understanding what it was, and they were just sort of posting a black screen and that was it. But you know, it was an opportunity for people to not be promoting themselves, but promoting, you know, change and how to change. And I think you know, I was in two minds about it, because I think, you know, for me, I want people to educate themselves a lot more, as I'm trying to do myself. And I think I saw people, you know, from different walks of life promoting, and it took me by surprise. But then I think at the same time, you have to allow people to hopefully have recognised, you know, actually I need to make a change too. So I think, you know, it's important to allow those people. But I also think it's important to continue that movement, you know, and it was a week ago or a week and a half ago, you know, and it's still the same, you know. And I think it's so important to continue to fight, and I do feel slightly it's different. But I was thinking, you know, this has been going on for hundreds and hundreds of years, and you know, before we came on today, I was sitting there and thinking, has it changed? And I think in that 400 years maybe, ever so slightly, and I think the only thing that has really changed is the fact that it's not as socially acceptable, and therefore it is done more silently, and not shouted out. But I don't think it's changed an awful lot, if I'm honest. And I think a lot of it is brushed under the carpet, and you know, there's so many things that I am not aware of, and you know, unless you go out and seek, you know, these different outlets and try and educate yourself, you know, more people are currently, like this time, wanting to do that. But I just hope that that doesn't die down with the trend dying down, and people are, you know, continuing to do so. And I just, it's hard to know, is this time different? I mean, I would like to believe yes, and from what we're seeing at the moment, yes. But you know, if you think about the publicity and the amount of people involved last week compared to this week, it has dropped, of course. But I hope that there is still enough people speaking out and continuing to speak out and continuing to make changes in their own life. You know, whether that's publicly or privately, I don't feel that everything needs to be so public. For me, you know, when I sent you that message, that wasn't for anybody else but you. And I know that you asked, you know, oh, can I share this, whatever, but that was your message and you do what you like. But I never for a second did that because I wanted people to see I believed in this or whatever. That was just how I felt. And I think, you know, it has died down, but then hopefully people are sort of thinking the same way of, you know, doing instead of being seen to be done. So I don't know, honestly.
So you don't know why it keeps coming back. Why do we keep coming back to this?
I think we keep coming back to this because it's too easy to keep coming back to it. It's too easy to really address the issue. We live in a white world, whether that is the education system, which obviously I know you were moaning kept coming up, Steph, last time, but let's face it, that's a common theme amongst all of us. Whether it's the white education system, whether it's healthcare, whether it's criminal justice system, it's through a white framework or a white picture frame, and it's really difficult to dismantle that because there are so many things involved in doing that. And it's very easy for people to say, for white people to say, oh, this is terrible, this is really bad, racism shouldn't happen, racism doesn't happen in Britain, it's a problem, it's an overseas problem, it's a problem in America, it's a problem in Brazil, it's a problem wherever. And it takes so much personal reflection, as you know, that's what Emma was hinting at, that kind of personal reflection to go, all right, what do I have views that are, you know, that are wrong? Do I judge someone in a certain way? Have I got a prejudged idea of what someone's going to say based on where they're from or the color of their skin? And that takes an awful lot for people to turn around and to self-reflect. I was listening to a podcast of one of the guys that was speaking on it, and he's an England international, he's a Black England international, and he was talking about how difficult it is for people to reflect on self and to reflect on what's happening in the world and to be really honest about it, and to admit that actually, yeah, I'm part of this problem because I'm really aware of it. There might be people that are you might be very aware of something, you will know that it happens and it keeps happening, but if you're not doing something about it, then you're part of the problem yourself. And that is a major thing for people and organizations and establishments to address and to say, right, there's a real problem here and we need to tackle it. And that's why it keeps coming back, because this issue keeps being presented, and then it's all too easy to kind of say, right, well, that's someone else thinks that. Somebody else, a far right person thinks that. Someone that goes on you know, on the demonstrations today when they're the statue defenders, that's what they think. It's not a problem in our organization, and that's why it keeps coming back for me, or at least one of the reasons.
And I think a lot of it is because we tend to think it doesn't happen here. We're not racist. And it's connecting your point about self-reflection. It's hard to kind of sit in that discomfort of, of course, I'm too intelligent to be racist, I'm too liberal to be racist. And I think it's just kind of finding that space to just be uncomfortable and just check yourself. Joe, I'm going to jump to you. Why do you think we keep coming back here? Joe, I can't hear you.
You're on mute, babes.
Oh, I am. Sorry, I play with, it's got a little mute button on it and I keep fiddling with it. It's a hard one to sort of to discuss, you know, why we get back here, because like you say, it's, you know, we've been here before. It's something that happens far too often, but like Emma and Mark have said, you know, this time it does seem that there's something different about the current situation following the death of George Floyd. And I do think that, you know, you look at the sort of the whole worldwide situation we're in with COVID-19, and I think it almost, I don't want to come across as sort of, you know, sensationalizing here, but it's almost a perfect storm where you've got a lot of people, you know, at home with time to think, time to reflect, off work for whatever reason, and this, you know, this horrible thing has happened, and it's sort of it's come at a time where people have got time to actually reflect and think, like we say, you know, thinking of, you know, as a white person, taking a minute, stepping back and thinking, you know, has this affected me? Have I, you know, contributed to this in any way, whether actively or passively? And I think it's the reason I think we're at the point now where this particular debate seems to be making ground that hasn't been made before, comes from, you know, being able to reflect on that. And I think now we're actually seeing change happening. We're seeing, you know, statues are coming down across the world, which should have, you know, come down at any point in the last 50 years. Really, people have always been saying, oh, it shouldn't be there, it shouldn't be there. Well, why has nothing been done about it? You know, you can argue whether or not it should have come down in that way, but it's the fact that they should have come down is almost not worth arguing. Yeah, it's just it's a tricky one, really. I think, you know, for someone who, as I said earlier, has learned about racism rather than experiencing it, it is, and as Mark said, it is tricky to sort of to self-reflect and you know, spot something like maybe that you've not been a part of, but not maybe you've enabled it by, you know, being silent about it or not speaking up about it. And I think that is where the real change is coming now. Hopefully, you know, long may it continue.
So there's two things that's coming up in my head and I want to kind of address them. One is that point you just made, Joe, about speaking up versus being silent. Mm-hmm. And then I kind of want to go back to this idea of sitting in discomfort just before Mark was frozen. This is an honest question, and I'm asking this because I'm talking to friends. Is it difficult as a white person to talk about race?
Can I start? I think, as I was saying to you, we've had a lot of conversations, but I think before I met you, I did find it a bit difficult, and I think I was in a denial a little bit, and I was quite naive, and you know, listened to the things that I'd learned at school, and you know, had no real idea of, you know, how big the problem of racism was. But I think, yeah, I will, you know, obviously everyone, I think, says, oh, I'm not racist, but what does that actually mean? Because there's one thing not to be actively racist and say like racial slurs and things like that, but as Joe says, sometimes ignoring it is part of the problem. So I think I used to, and you know, it is about self-reflection and looking at yourself, and I think the whole point of sometimes it is meant to be uncomfortable, and that is the point, because you know, so many people are experiencing you know, different emotions and you know, events that are affecting their life significantly because of racism, but I don't feel as uncomfortable, and I think that is because we've had so many conversations, and it probably is uncomfortable to begin with, because you know, you are, I guess, in denial, or you're a bit, you know, you don't want to say the wrong thing, and I think this is why this is really important, and none of us want to say the wrong thing, but you know, we're all willing to learn, and we want change, you know, for our friends and the people we don't know, you know, for the people that are experiencing this, whether they're friends, colleagues, whatever, but I think talking about it sort of stamps out that uncomfortableness a little bit, and the more you talk about something, you know, whether it is race or anything, the more you talk about it, the more, you know, you listen to people's experiences, and the more empathetic you can be, and the more understanding, because you're really sort of delving into, you know, what people are facing and experiencing and how that makes someone feel. And you know, I think to listen to so many conversations and experiences and events that are happening, you know, to you or to whoever or around the world, you know, if it's being talked about a lot, then it is very unlikely that, you know, you're not feeling like you have to be a part of this change. So I think by talking about it, yes, it can be uncomfortable, but that is the point. And the more you talk, the more awareness is raised, and the more, you know, comfortable it becomes.
The more we normalize it, the more we talk.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, is anyone else, is it uncomfortable talking about race for a white person?
Yeah, I would say that, you know, I think I've got a different perspective on this to say maybe Emma and Mark, who've grown up in South London and Birmingham, with very, very lots of sort of ethnic diversity in those cities. I don't want to knock Newcastle because it's it's a wonderful place, very, very inclusive, very open. But as a community, it is 90, if not I think 95% white. So I think back to my primary school, and there was the black child, there was the Asian girl, there was someone else who actually escapes me, but it was a class of 30 children, and 28 of them were white. So it was a sense of it was very obvious that this person, there was something different about them. And I think as a child, you notice that you don't hate or discriminate, but you notice that there is a difference. And hang on, well, 28 people are like this, but this one person is like this. And I think that is a really sort of interesting sort of way to grow up. And I think it's not. I think a lot of people, when it comes to talking about race, I think especially when you look outside of London, a lot of cities and towns are predominantly white, and I think it's, again, like Emma says, a lack of exposure. People who, they may not hold racist views, they may not say racial slurs. I mean, not that that's any bar to set, but they might not, just by pure ignorance, and by that I mean just not having those conversations, not being in a place to actually talk about it, because it isn't part of their lives. And I think then when they are, when they're older and they come up into a situation where they, are faced with a difficult conversation, and it's all of a sudden they can sort of, people can get a bit defensive and pull back, and they might want to start reflecting and think, oh God, have I said something? Have I done something? Have I, again, people don't want to be seen to have contributed to racism in any way. And I think that can make people a little bit defensive and uncomfortable, and makes it quite a difficult conversation to have. Yeah.
As you said that, John, I'm reminded of when we first met and we worked together, and I just think you really have to work through the discomfort.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Oh God, what did I do?
You didn't do anything. But I'm just looking at just the journey from when we first worked together towards the end. How comfortable you were to say certain things, how the jokes were different, just that normal, natural. We were not talking about the jokes.
Yeah, we wanted
it would be so wrong to talk about our conversations, but it's just seeing that journey from obviously that point of not knowing to having those conversations, and also making those jokes. Some people might disagree with that, but I just think if I call you friend, you're my friend. You're not my white friend, you're my friend who happens to be white. It means I get to leverage that relationship in our conversation. It means I trust your intentions when you say something. And even if you say something that's not that right, maybe it's my personality, obviously I'm going to check you. And then we carry on laughing afterwards. And I think that openness and that honesty needs to be there. This is what I was talking about earlier, about friendships versus allies. There are things, if you're my ally, the conversation will be different. And as I said that, I'm remembering on Thursday. So after we agreed to do this, I think Thursday evening, I had a little panic attack thinking, oh my God. And I'm thinking, but why are you nervous? You talk about this all the time with these people. And I was thinking, one is the pressure of they're white, and I need to ask them certain things. I need to ask it to them in a certain way, so it doesn't look as if I'm not addressing the real issue. So I need to be truthful and a true representation of the Black community, and ask the questions that they would want to be asked. And then I'm thinking about you guys as my friends. And this is what I mean about friends versus allies. I'm thinking, I don't want them to feel uncomfortable in the process, to feel as if they have to say certain things in a certain way and not be open or feel like it's safe enough to share honestly. But I think that's what's needed. That friendship, if you were not my friends, and I thought of that, if you were my friends, I wouldn't have had that little moment of being anxious, because I know what I'm like, and I know exactly what questions to ask, and I know exactly how I would ask it. And I wouldn't have that next element of thinking about that person's feelings in the same way. Yes, you'll be conscientious because you're talking to another person, but I wouldn't have that sense of, I want to protect my friends and I want to keep my friends safe. So I think having these very difficult conversations and thinking about change and making change sustainable, I think we need to build relationships with people where we can be open and we can be honest, and where there is margin for error. And when you will say something wrong, and I will get peed off, and I will tell you about yourself, and then we come back to the table again and we move forward. It's just going to be fake. Otherwise, we're just going to say nice things and say things. It was that Jess.
I told you she'd want a part in this. I'm surprised it's gone this long without her talking.
And say nice things, but then we won't have lasting change, because you won't really tell me what's wrong because you don't want to offend me, and then I'm not going to want to tell you what's wrong because I don't want to offend you. And this is what I think why we keep coming back here, because I think sometimes we're not being open and we're not coming to the conversation and coming to the table with all our emotions, whether they're going to be negative or positive, but just having that space to have that genuine conversation and connection to the subject. Sometimes I think why people talk about race, it's very cognitive. It's this articulate, intelligent conversation. It's very cerebral. There's no connection to the issue. There's no real empathy. And this is just very, very general. I'm not saying every white person does that. I'm just saying this is what sometimes, how it comes across to us. It's cerebral, and you don't really feel the issue because it doesn't affect or bother you.
Can I just, on the back of what you just said there, that is, your original question was, I think is it comfortable or is it uncomfortable? And this sort of theme of discomfort, and this goes on, sort of tags on to what Joe was saying as well, is all about context. It's context of life experience. If you've had been to primary, secondary school, college, university, whatever, had work experiences where you've shared spaces with people from different countries, different religions, different races, whatever it might be, you're going to be more geared up to have these conversations. You're going to be, and this is a generalization, in a more sort of, you're more able to have those conversations. You were just sort of talking about there, what was the thing you said at the end, Steph? Just
about normalizing the conversation and it being cerebral versus
and that's kind of a question of that's around context as well. If something has happened to you or a friend that I know has been as a result of a racist incident, whether it's overt or covert, whatever it is, I think back to times where we sat in a classroom together and you watched a music video and I said, oh, have you seen this? And you watched the video and it affected you very differently to the way it affected. And I remember sitting there watching your reaction, because of the part of the video, it's about a young boy who goes out on the street and bad things happen. And I think and this was me jumping into your head, you were thinking, oh my God, Joshua one day or Mali one day. Mm-hmm. Now, without having that context, without having that experience or that friendship, as you were talking about, that access to that privilege of having a friendship in that sense, it's very hard and people will feel discomfort. But I also think that, and this is the final thing I want to say on it, is I think that the fact that there is discomfort, and this is something that's not affecting my life. I am, a very privileged person. I'm white, male, heterosexual. Yeah, if I can sort of see that and speak about that, and as Emma and Joe have both said as well, there will be discomfort in this conversation. I think we were all probably a little bit apprehensive throughout the day today, thinking, oh, as Emma said, no one wants to say the wrong thing, no one wants to be seen to be doing the wrong thing or whatever. But that discomfort is really important because it shows that it is very significant, that there is something significant at play here. And without that, if it was all comfort and all nice and all rosy and all easy, then probably not an issue.
I think also, when people are defensive, like you look, as you were mentioning, like the statue defenders or whatever, people are quite defensive. And I think that's also important to, reflect on, why am I being defensive? Because of the discomfort that you feel. And,
you don't want to admit that there's a problem.
Yeah, there's a problem, and so you're being defensive because it's not personally affecting you, and therefore you're happy living the way you're living or whatever, and ignoring the issue, and that's why you're defensive. Not everyone, but I think a lot of people are defensive because they don't have experiences, or they don't have close friends maybe that have had these experiences. And I think people can be defensive because of the discomfort that they feel. So yeah.
And it's not just discomfort. Change is very inconveniencing. Like to change is hard work. It's the fact that sometimes people may feel as if their whole world will be disrupted. I have to reorganize not just my thinking, but my way of life. And for some people, especially if you are not connected to the issue, that is a big investment and a big ask. So for some people, that is what it is. I don't want to explore the discomfort. I don't want to sit in this sadness. I don't want to feel this feeling. I want to keep it cerebral. I don't want to process it on an emotional level because I do not have the strength or time to move towards that change, because change is costly and change is inconvenient.
And that's going to be the challenge, where groups of people, whether they exist in like an echo chamber and they've got people around them that think the same way, that have had similar life experiences, those are the conversations that are going to be the difficult ones, because you're going to people have to really challenge there, and be brave and be sort of outspoken about it. And I can't remember who said it, Steph, I think it might have been Becky, be unapologetic in it, be unapologetic in challenging people, in having those conversations, whether it's it's your family members sat down together, or a group of white friends that are talking about something. Have those difficult conversations, and be prepared to be unapologetic in challenging it at all times, because as soon as you let things slip, that's when it and that goes back to the thing that you were asking earlier, why does it keep coming back round? If we keep letting it slip, it's going to keep coming around again and again and again.